This is Sophie Heller, and this is an ACT science question. In this question, we're asking, so if this premise with all the Archaebacteria and all these long things is true, what would scientist 1 say to counter that? So it's easy to get confused with all these really specific biological terms, but we just have to remember what scientist 1's original point is. So scientist 1 is arguing for the point that all species shared a common single-cell ancestor. So let's keep this in mind as we look at the question. So let's try to parse this. Neither Archaebacteria nor Eubacteria have nuclei, but eukaryotes do. Archaebacteria are anaerobes, and Eubacteria are aerobes, and the two groups are genetically distinct. Scientist 1 would say that. So this is really confusing, and it doesn't even make sense to try to parse it because, again, we're just trying to go for passage analysis. We don't need to understand the scientific concepts. So the basic idea is that things are distinct, genetically distinct, which is scientist 2's argument that all organisms did not evolve from a common ancestor. So what this boils down to is how would scientist 1 counter scientist 2's point? So let's look at our choices. Choice 1, Darwin's genetic tree doesn't apply to the lowest life forms. This one makes sense because scientist 1 is talking about how the evolutionary tree is very accurate and it follows it up all the way from single-cell creatures into multicellular organisms. So that's not going to be good. Choice number 2. Genetic diversification began to occur in the earliest life forms, and differences among the descendants of a single ancestral prokaryote predisposed them to survive in different environments. So a little bit complicated, but the basic idea is that this genetic diversification occurred early, so this doesn't disprove scientist 1's idea that everything comes from a single-cell ancestor. He's just talking about genetic diversification. So that's probably going to be a good answer. But let's just look at our other ones. Choice 3. This supports evolution from several separate ancestors. So scientist 1 is really bent on the idea that we come from a single-cell ancestor, every single organism. This is scientist 2's idea that organisms did not evolve from a common ancestor. So scientist 1 isn't going to suddenly change his mind and go with scientist 2. So that's not good. Choice 4. Organisms descended from a common ancestor wouldn't have such different characteristics. But if scientist 1 believes this, it would completely contradict his idea that all organisms, no matter what they are, descended from a common single-cell ancestor. So this is going to contradict his idea. So as we see, choice 2 is the only one that's going to keep with scientist 1's beliefs. So choice 2 is our answer.